Hello, everyone. Sat Sri Akal ji. My name is Sandy Chatha, and I'm honored and privileged to be sharing the various stages of my life journey with you today in celebration of International Women's Day 2022. This year's theme is Break the Bias, as we work collectively towards a gender-equal world. Without knowing it at times, I have been breaking the biases throughout my life. I was born in Punjab, where my birth was unwelcomed, as I was the third daughter and the family was wanting a son. My mother was not treated well by the extended family because she had daughters. Listening to her life experiences has always been heartbreaking. At birth, I was given the name Baksho because the cultural myth was that by naming me Baksho, God will forgive the family and bless them with a son in the near future. Surprisingly enough, it worked. My brother was born 5 years after me. I don't have too many fond childhood memories, no baby pictures, no favorite toys, no love and affection from anyone. But as a child, I didn't know any better. As I became more aware of gender bias, I realized that all of this was because I was a girl, an undesirable gender in the Indian community and in society as a whole. We as a family were very fortunate that we immigrated first to England in the 1960s and then to Canada in 1974 and made Vancouver our home over the next 40 plus years. In my childhood, I quickly learned to stand up for myself and others, to speak up and be heard. I was the only child in my family that could confront my father without the fears of discipline. In grade 4, at the age of 10, I stood up to bullying. I got into a school ground fight with a classmate who was not as tough as he thought he was. I don't condone violence, but sometimes a girl just has to break the bias and get into a fist fight. That was my first scuffle with a boy, but definitely not the last. By the age of 12, I had made some very serious decisions about my life and my personal identity. Up until now, everyone called me Baksho, but I hated that name partly because of the story behind it, and partly because, as a new immigrant with an uncommon name, other kids would make fun of it. So one day while watching TV, I saw a commercial for a doll called Sandy, and it was at that moment I decided my name was going to be Sandy. I had developed a dual identity for myself in order to manage the struggles of maintaining a balance between the East-West culture. These struggles grew over the years, and it became even more important for me to maintain the two identities. Also, by the age of 12, I knew that I wanted to become a police officer so that I could help people, and especially females. In my early teen years, I learned to protect myself, both physically and emotionally. I set goals, followed my dreams and ambitions, even when at times it seemed impossible to do so. I wanted to help protect females because I had witnessed so much physical, emotional, and sexual abuse in our community, including issues with alcohol addiction. Some of those experiences were my own in my childhood. I had no idea what I would have to go through to become a police officer, but I was determined to succeed and not let anyone stand in the way. I had no mentors, coaches, or role models to look up to. My family didn't take my dream to become a police officer seriously until I turned 19 and was in a position to apply for the job. At that time, my father insisted that I got married before I left the house for training, which would take place in Montreal and Regina. Had I been my father's son, I'm sure this condition would not have been imposed on me. Being the stubborn young woman that I was not going to let this stand in the way of me fulfilling my desire to become a police officer, so I agreed to get married. It was an arranged marriage with a bit of a twist. I fell in love with my husband at first sight. He was a handsome young Punjabi man, 21 years old, who had just come to Canada as a refugee. I was convinced it was a marriage of convenience for him, but over the next few months, as we secretly met with each other, and my parents don't know that to this day, I could tell he was just as in love with me as I was with him. In my 20s, I learned to challenge myself and never take no for an answer. I pushed myself physically and mentally, at times over the limit. At the age of 21, my dream of becoming a police officer came true. On August 29, 1989, I was the first Indo-Canadian woman from the Sikh community to join the RCMP as a police constable. I successfully completed the training and was posted in Leduc, Alberta in May of 1990, where I was the first visible minority in the RCMP to serve the community. There's not enough time today for me to share all the hardships I faced in training, on the job, and in life. But picture a young Indo-Canadian woman in an RCMP uniform in a small town in Redneck, Alberta, with a gun on her hip, set out on patrol by herself in unfamiliar territory, by her female training officer, just so that we could break the bias and prove that women are just as equal and capable as men in uniform. My trainer was supposed to be beside me for the next 6 months, but instead she decided that I could work on my own after just 1 week of working together. I was too young, naive, ambitious to even challenge her decision. I even worked graveyards by myself and at times was afraid of my own shadow. I thanked my lucky stars and my determination to succeed as I came home safely every day to my husband. My policing career was short-lived as I was put in a situation where I had to make the most difficult decision in my life. I had to resign from my dream job that I had worked so hard for in order to support my husband and his family obligations back in India. He was not able to find employment in Alberta at the time, and being the eldest son, he needed to provide financial support to his family. The only solution at the time was for us to move back to Vancouver, where he could find employment, but that meant I had to leave the RCMP because in those days they had a policy in place that an officer could not work in their home province, and therefore I could not request a transfer to BC. Had I not been a female, I wouldn't have had to make that choice, but I chose to support my husband and his family. I was fortunate enough to be hired by Canada Customs, today it's known as Canada Border Services Agency, once I moved back to Vancouver, BC. And there's another twist to the story. I had to delay my start date. So upon my return to Vancouver, I did have the opportunity to join other local police departments, but as fate would have it, I was now expecting my first child and had to put policing on hold. I became a mother at the age of 24 and went to work for Canada Customs once my son was 4 months old. I was just a couple of months on the job when I realized I was expecting a second child. I still remember to this day the fear inside me when I had to inform my boss that I was expecting and could not perform all the duties. I didn't know my rights as an employee and thought that I would lose my job. But I also couldn't jeopardize my pregnancy, so I went into his office and just told him the truth. I was very fortunate to be in a unionized position where I was protected as an employee. I had a healthy second son and was now considered very lucky in the family because I had boys. I was actually quite disappointed because I truly wanted a daughter. So a couple of years later, I forced my husband into having another child, and I ended up giving birth to twin boys. Well, as you can imagine, I was the talk of the town in the Indian community. Wherever I went, relatives and friends would talk about how lucky I was to have 4 sons. My response was always, but I wanted a daughter. Deep down inside, I think I wanted a daughter so that I could give her the life filled with love and opportunities way beyond whatever I had. By the age of 28, I had 4 sons under the age of 4, a new career in law enforcement with Canada Customs, and extended family obligations. In my 30s, I struggled to adapt and accept what life had thrown at me. I often thought about my policing career and always had the urge to go back. But with 4 young sons now and living the typical Punjabi household life, I decided I could no longer pursue a policing career. I made the best of my CBSA career, which has been quite rewarding as well. In March 2007, I was assigned as the first female acting superintendent to manage a Marine team with Canada Border Services Agency in over 10 years. This was breaking the bias of gender equality. I had a fear of heights and a fear of the ocean, both which didn't help when you have to board a container ship out at anchor in English Bay, Vancouver. But I wasn't going to let those fears stop me from performing my duties. I was so blessed to have a team of caring and compassionate officers who understood my fears and made me feel safe by watching out for me. It was a struggle trying to manage shift work, a family, and fulfilling all my cultural obligations. My career gave me joy, a purpose in life, a challenge that I always crave, and a sense of independence. Just when I thought things were going to be okay, my world turned upside down. When my husband suddenly passed away in April 2007 at the age of 41, I was just 39 years old. My twin sons were 11, and my older two sons were 14 and 15. So here I was, now labeled a widow, a single mom, a woman in the eyes of society needed to be protected, who needed to protect her reputation because it could so easily be tarnished as she no longer had a husband beside her. I often lived in fear, with many barriers placed in front of me, some by myself and some by society. I didn't have the courage or the strength to break those barriers. I was constantly having to watch over my shoulder, always hearing the voice in my head, what will people say? Every time I wanted to go out or dress up or travel. But as time went by, I started to realize it didn't matter what people said or thought. What mattered was how I want to live my life. And as long as I was providing the best life possible within my means for my children, nothing else mattered. In my 40s is when I struggled the most. When my husband passed away, I was left with a huge financial burden, 4 kids to raise on my own, a career with the CBSA in which I was still wanting to excel in, and lack of any emotional support. I was determined to make a better life for my sons and myself, and as the years went by, I continued to seek opportunities that would eventually put us in a better financial situation. I have always been one to take risks and accept my failures as a learning opportunity. After some creative thinking, experimenting with different lending and investing opportunities, I was in a position where I could invest in real estate beyond our primary home. One thing led to another, and today I'm a partner in a hotel for which I oversee the operations of. When I was exploring the opportunity to build and sell residential homes a few years back, I met with an Indo-Canadian builder who specifically said to me, and I quote, "Don't try to compete with the men. You will not succeed in construction." His remark was clearly sexist and pointing out that as an Indo-Canadian woman, I should not be in the construction industry. My response to him was, I don't compete with others. I only compete with myself. And if I choose to enter the construction industry, I can assure you I will succeed. I know that I can do anything that I put my mind to. He clearly wasn't expecting that response. Needless to say, I never saw him again. In my late 40s, I learned to love myself and accept who I am as a person. Up until now, I had my insecurities about my physical appearance, as I never saw myself as a beautiful woman. But then I looked in the mirror each day. I started to see the beauty from within glow on the outside. I was no longer ashamed of my Punjabi name, Baksho, because I wanted to stay connected with the positive values of my Punjabi culture. My husband also always called me by that name. In my 50s, I am learning to live for myself, learning to let go of some of the barriers I had placed in my life path, learning to allow my children to become independent and not worry about the Punjabi cultural norms, where I am expected to mother them for the rest of their lives. In a few months, I will be closing an important chapter in my life. After 31 years with the CBSA, I will be retiring at the end of this year at the age of 55. I set this goal 5 years ago, and I'm excited to see it turning into reality. As I always say, I'm not retiring from life, just opening the pages to the next chapter of my life, where I've already written a few pages of my story. I had been working towards being self-employed in a couple of various industries such as consulting, life coaching, and providing families financial protection through life insurance products. My dream is to employ women from all backgrounds and education levels and to guide them in becoming strong, independent, and successful individuals, having their own identity and being proud of their achievements. I am also very proud to say that 90% of my employees at our hotel are women, and I am determined to have an all-female team in the near future. My story is very similar to many of your stories. As women, we have all struggled to break the bias, to be seen, to be heard, to be respected, to be appreciated, and to be loved unconditionally. Never give up hope. Never give up on your dreams and goals. In closing, I would like to share a quote from an unknown author. When life throws stones on you, pick them up and learn to use them to build the strongest, firmest foundation that no one could ever destroy. I would like to thank you all for taking time out of your day and participating in this wonderful event. I would also like to thank the Punjabi Community Health Services team for giving me the opportunity